Bobby Martinez stood in the empty corridor of Oracle Arena, holding a letter that would change his life forever. His hands trembled slightly as he read for the third time the words written on Golden State Warriors' letterhead. Tears streamed down his weathered face, forming small trails over the wrinkles that decades of hard work had carved. "He remembered me," he murmured to the empty echo of the corridor. "After all these years, he remembered." To understand how we arrived at this extraordinary moment, we need to go back 10 years in time, when it all began. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November 2013, and the clock hands marked exactly 5 o'clock in the morning when Bobby pushed through the heavy glass doors of Oracle Arena. Oakland's cold cut through his faded blue uniform like a sharp blade. His footsteps echoed through the empty parking lot, accompanied only by the jingling of keys attached to his belt. Familiar music that had been playing for 15 years since he assumed the position of head custodian of the arena. Bobby opened his yellowed thermos, and the aroma of black coffee rose like a comforting cloud in the cold air. It was the same coffee Carmen used to make, strong and without sugar, the way real workers drink it. Carmen. 2 years had passed since cancer took her away, but Bobby still prepared coffee for 2 every morning, out of habit, and perhaps with a hint of hope. Now he was raising Sophia alone, his 12-year-old granddaughter who inherited her grandmother's smart eyes and the Martinez stubbornness. Their son, Sophia's father, died in a car accident 6 months before Carmen discovered the disease. Bobby became father and mother all at once, at 58 years old, when he should have been thinking about retirement. But there was no time for self-pity. Bills didn't pay themselves, and Sophia's school uniform cost more than Bobby earned in a week. Besides his work at the arena, he did odd jobs on weekends, gardening, painting, anything that put food on the table and kept Sophia's dream alive. The girl wanted to be a doctor. She talked about it with shining eyes, the same way Carmen talked about the garden plants. "Grandpa," she would say, "I'm going to cure people the way you take care of this place, with love and dedication." Bobby would smile, but inside he calculated impossible numbers. Medical school was for people with money, not for custodians' granddaughters. In those early morning hours, before the arena came alive with the movement of employees and athletes, Bobby found his peace. It was his private sanctuary where he could work in silence and think about Carmen. She always said a phrase that echoed in his mind during the most difficult moments. "Great things happen when nobody's watching. Mi amor." The Warriors weren't going through a good time that season. Few fans showed up to the games, and there was an atmosphere of uncertainty hanging over the entire organization. Bobby felt it in the air, the tension of executives in the corridors, the whispered conversations about changes that would come. While pushing his cleaning cart toward the main court, Bobby reflected on his own life. His body ached more each day. 15 years cleaning an arena the size of a city block left marks. His knees protested at every staircase. His back complained at every movement to reach the highest bleachers. But he continued, because Sophia needed him strong. It was during this familiar morning routine that everything changed. Bobby was mopping the bleachers when he heard something that shouldn't be there. The unmistakable sound of a basketball bouncing rhythmically against the court floor. He stopped, confused. There was no practice scheduled for that time. No player should be in the arena before 7 in the morning. Moved by curiosity and the instinct of a responsible custodian, Bobby silently descended to the double doors that gave access to the main court. The sound got louder with each step, not just the bouncing of the ball, but also the recognizable swoosh of the net being cut by accurate shots. Through the small window in the doors, Bobby saw something that would mark him for the rest of his life. A young player was alone on the court, completely absorbed in his training routine. Sweat streamed down his face as he executed shot after shot from the three-point line. It wasn't just practice, it was pure obsession. Every movement had purpose. Every shot carried the weight of dreams and determination. Bobby didn't recognize the player at that moment, but something about the kid impressed him deeply. It wasn't his technique or his precision. It was the intensity, the way he treated each shot as if his life depended on it. The manner in which he moved, even when he missed, as if failure was just fuel to try again. "This kid has something special," Bobby murmured to himself, unknowingly echoing the words Carmen used to use to describe unique people. For 40 minutes, Bobby watched in silence. The young man didn't stop, didn't give up, didn't allow himself moments of prolonged rest. It was the kind of dedication Bobby had learned working since he was 14 years old, when he had to abandon school to help the family. It was the kind of focus Sophia demonstrated when she studied late at night, determined to conquer her own stars. When the practice finally ended, the player grabbed a towel and prepared to leave. It was then that his eyes met Bobby's through the door window. For a moment, the two men stared at each other. Worker recognizing worker, dedication identifying dedication. The young man made a respectful nod with his head. Bobby returned the gesture, feeling something connect between them, even without words. There was no mistrust or irritation at being observed, just mutual recognition of two people who understood the sacred value of hard work. When the player left the arena, Bobby continued his cleaning, but his mind was elsewhere. While wiping the empty chairs, a question echoed in his thoughts. Could it be that Carmen was right about God placing special people in our path exactly when we need them? Something told him that this silent encounter wouldn't be the last. 6 months passed since that first silent encounter, and an extraordinary routine had been established between two men who barely knew each other. You can notice that some of life's deepest connections are born not from words, but from rituals shared in silence. Every morning, at exactly 5 o'clock, Bobby pushed through the Oracle Arena doors, knowing that in a few minutes he would hear the familiar sound of the ball bouncing on the main court, music that had become the soundtrack of his renewed hope. Sometimes Steph was already there when Bobby arrived, sweating as if he had been training for hours, the acrid smell of effort mixed with the sweet aroma of pure determination. Other times, Bobby would begin his cleaning, listening to footsteps echoing through the corridors like beats of a giant heart, followed by the familiar creak of the court door opening. A silent and respectful dance developed between them. Bobby cleaned with his precise and careful movements. Steph trained with his crystalline obsession, and both greeted each other with waves when their paths crossed like ships in the dawn. How is it possible that two strangers can create such a profound language without ever exchanging a word? As days transformed into weeks, and weeks into months that passed like pages of a book being written in silence, Bobby began to notice something that no sports journalist or fan could see. He was witnessing the construction of something special, brick by brick, shot by shot, at 5 o'clock in the morning when the world still slept. And great things happen when nobody's watching. Some mornings were brutal to watch, cutting like ice blades that pierce the soul. Bobby witnessed Steph missing 50 consecutive shots and still continuing, as if each error was a lesson engraved in fire on the flesh of his spirit. The sound of the ball hitting the rim echoed through the arena like groans of pain. But Steph continued, relentless. It's impossible not to feel admiration when we witness someone transforming failure into fuel for greatness. On other occasions, Bobby saw the young man arrive visibly limping, favoring his right ankle that everyone said was his Achilles' heel. But the kid absolutely refused to decrease the intensity of training, moving across the court like a wounded warrior who prefers to die fighting than live surrendering. There was a specific morning in March that Bobby would never forget, a morning that cut his heart like a knife heated in fire. Steph had arrived earlier than normal, and when Bobby passed by the court to check the cleaning of the bleachers, he saw something that awakened all his paternal instincts. The young man was sitting alone in the center of the court, head in his hands, shoulders trembling slightly with the weight of pain that went beyond the physical. He wasn't crying. It was something deeper than tears. It was the pure frustration of someone fighting against their own limitations, like David facing Goliath with only stones in hand. Have you ever wondered how much weight a young soul can carry before breaking? Bobby stopped at the door, torn between the instinct to comfort and respect for the privacy of others. He chose to remain silent, but sent a whispered prayer for Carmen, wherever she was, to give strength to that boy who reminded him so much of himself at 20 years old, full of dreams but surrounded by doubts, like walls that seemed insurmountable. It was Sophia who finally revealed to Bobby the true dimension of what he was witnessing. One night, while helping his granddaughter with math homework at the small kitchen table that creaked under the weight of so many shared meals, she noticed a photo on his cell phone. It was a blurred image that Bobby had taken accidentally while cleaning near the court, a moment captured without intention, but loaded with meaning. "Grandpa!" Sophia shouted, almost knocking over the glass of milk that left a white mark on the tabletop like a crescent moon. "Do you know Steph Curry from the Warriors? He's my favorite player." Bobby looked at the photo with completely new eyes, as if seeing colors for the first time after a life in black and white. For months, he had called the young man simply the hard-working kid in his thoughts. Now he discovered he had been watching one of the NBA's most promising athletes, someone Sophia admired and cheered for fervently. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, with that mixture of curiosity and indignation that only 12-year-old children can express like a perfect storm of emotions. Bobby smiled, running his hand lovingly through his granddaughter's hair that shone under the yellowish kitchen light. "Some treasures are private, Mija. Some moments are too sacred to be shared. It's impossible not to recognize that true intimacy is born from mutual respect, not from satisfied curiosity." But the discovery didn't change anything in Bobby's routine. Steph continued being the hardworking kid in his mind, because great things happen when nobody's watching, and what Bobby witnessed every morning transcended fame, million-dollar contracts, or media expectations. What mattered was pure dedication. The same he had seen in Carmen when she fought cancer with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cubs. The same he saw in Sophia when she studied late to get high grades, dreaming of a future that seemed distant, like stars in the sky. During the second year of this silent routine, Bobby began to notice subtle changes in Steph, like a gardener who notices the first flowers blooming after a harsh winter. The young man seemed more confident, his movements more fluid, as if he was finding his own voice amid the chorus of critics and fans. How is it possible that silent observation can nourish both the observer and the observed? But he also noticed something more touching. Steph had begun to greet him by name, reading the letters embroidered on Bobby's uniform as if they were sacred scriptures. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez," Steph said one morning, his voice echoing through the empty arena like a bell announcing a new day. Those were the first words exchanged between them in more than a year of silent coexistence. Bobby felt a wave of warmth in his chest. It wasn't just recognition, it was respect. The kind of respect earned with consistency, arriving every day, doing your job with dignity, even when nobody is paying attention. You can notice that true recognition is born not from what we say, but from what we do when we believe nobody is watching. As the second year advanced like a river finding its natural course, Bobby found himself emotionally investing in Steph's journey, in a way he couldn't even explain. When Steph played well, Bobby arrived home more animated, whistling melodies Carmen used to hum. When the news talked about injuries or criticism, Bobby felt an almost paternal protection rising in his chest, like a shield forged in love. "Carmen," he would murmur alone during his nighttime rounds through the empty arena, words echoing among the chairs like whispered prayers. "You should see this boy. He has your determination, your strength to continue when everything seems impossible." Then came the moment that almost broke them both. A moment that would test the strength of both like a storm that reveals the true nature of trees. It was a cold January morning of the second year, when winter bit like a wounded animal. Bobby arrived and didn't hear the familiar sound of the ball bouncing, silence that cut his heart like a sharp blade. Worried, he went straight to the court and found Steph on the floor, holding his right ankle, expression contorted with physical pain and something much worse, despair, born from the soul. Bobby stayed hidden behind the bleachers, watching Steph struggle to get up like a wounded warrior who refuses to accept defeat. The young man managed to stand, tried to run, and collapsed again like a house of cards touched by the wind. It was then that Bobby heard the words that would haunt him for weeks, words that echoed through the arena like lament. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I really am made of glass." Every paternal instinct of Bobby screamed to run there, help the young man, tell him that injuries heal, but the character he demonstrated every morning was indestructible, like diamond forged under pressure. But something greater held him back: respect for Steph's privacy, the deep understanding that some moments of vulnerability need to be lived in solitude. How many times in life do we need to find our own strength before accepting help from others? Steph eventually managed to leave the court, limping, and Bobby finished his cleaning with a heavy heart like stone in his chest. That night, he was the first to arrive home without being able to smile at Sophia, carrying someone else's pain as if it were his own. 2 weeks later, when Steph returned to morning training with his ankle wrapped but determination intact like a flame that refuses to be extinguished, Bobby felt a pride he couldn't explain. It was like seeing a son overcome a difficult test, a test that forges character in the fire of adversity. At the end of the second year, something extraordinary happened that would forever change the silent nature of their connection. Bobby arrived for the afternoon shift and found a package in the employee's locker room with his name written by hand in careful handwriting, as if each word were a small gift. Inside was a pair of autographed basketball shoes that smelled like new leather and realized dreams, accompanied by a simple note: "For the man who arrives before everyone and leaves after everyone. Thank you for the silent company. SC." It's impossible not to be moved when we discover that our silent presence touched a life in ways we never imagined. That night, Bobby took the shoes home with hands trembling with emotion, as if carrying sacred relics. Sophia examined every detail as if they were treasures discovered in an archaeological excavation, her eyes shining with renewed admiration for her grandfather. "Grandpa," she said, looking directly into his eyes with that seriousness that only wise children possess, "do you think he knows how much you root for him?" Bobby smiled, thinking about the thousands of shots he had witnessed, the cold mornings shared in silence like sacred communions, the mutual dedication of two men who understood the sacred value of hard work. "I think special people always know when other special people are rooting for them, even in silence, mija," he said, his voice loaded with wisdom acquired in decades of life. "It's as if there's a language that only hard-working hearts can speak." While carefully storing the shoes in the closet as if they were precious jewels, Bobby had no idea that the third year would bring changes that would transform his life forever. Because great things happen when nobody's watching, and the greatest transformations are born from the smallest gestures of recognition. Third year, season 2015, 2016. You can notice that some years carry the weight of destiny in each passing day, as if the universe conspired to transform dreams into reality. Steph was no longer the insecure boy Bobby had found 3 years before, sweating as if his life depended on each shot. Now he arrived at the arena like an experienced warrior, carrying the league MVP title and leading three-point shooting statistics like a maestro who dominated his symphony. But he still arrived at 5 in the morning. Bobby noticed the subtle but profound difference in the morning. Training sessions. The smell of sweat now came mixed with the sweet aroma of confidence, and the sounds echoing through the court were no longer of desperation, but of artistic refinement. It was like watching a sculptor polishing a masterpiece that already revealed its beauty, each movement loaded with crystalline purpose. How is it possible that one person's transformation can inspire such profound changes in another's life? Steph's growing success planted an unexpected seed in Bobby's heart, a seed that grew like a wild plant that refuses to be tamed by the limitations life imposes. For the first time in years, Bobby began to dream not just for Sophia, but for himself. It was on a cold November night that Bobby made a decision that would change the course of his life. Sitting at the kitchen table with Sophia, helping her with science homework, while the wind whistled through the windows like melancholic music, he announced something he didn't even believe he would do. "Mija," he said, his voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. "Grandpa is going back to school." Sophia raised her eyes from the book, surprise shining in her pupils, like stars discovering the first light. "Study what, Grandpa?" "I'm going to take a night course to be a maintenance technician," Bobby explained, feeling the weight of words like precious stones on his tongue. "Maybe I can get a better job. Maybe I can help with your medical studies." It's impossible not to be moved when we witness someone rediscovering that dreams have no expiration date. Sophia jumped from the chair and hugged her grandfather with a force that almost knocked him down, her tears wetting his faded shirt like beneficial rain after a long drought. "Grandpa, you're the bravest man I know." That night, Bobby enrolled in the online course, typing each letter with fingers that trembled with hope and fear. Great things happen when nobody's watching, and he was about to prove this in his own life, inspired by the silent example he witnessed every morning. During the following months, Bobby's life gained a different rhythm. He woke up at 4:30 to arrive at the arena at 5, witnessed Steph's training as a sacred ritual, worked all day with renewed energy, and studied at night while Sophia did her homework beside him. It was exhausting, like climbing an endless mountain, but also energizing, like discovering you have strengths you never knew you possessed. The arena's administration began to notice Bobby's renewed dedication. His supervisor, a grumpy man who rarely praised anyone, commented, "Martinez, I don't know what you're putting in your morning coffee, but keep it up. I've never seen this place so spotless." Have you ever wondered how recognition can be more nourishing than any food? Sophia flourished alongside her grandfather, her studies improving like a plant receiving the exact amount of sunlight. She constantly talked about medicine, about how she wanted to help people, about how her grandfather was her greatest inspiration. "Grandpa," she would say, "if you can go back to school at 58 years old, I can conquer anything." But then came the morning that would change everything forever. It was the eve of the most important game of the season, playoffs that would determine if the Warriors would continue their journey toward the title. Bobby arrived at the arena at 5 in the morning, as always, but something was wrong. The silence weighed like a suffocating blanket. There was no sound of bouncing ball, no familiar energy that always filled the space. Steph wasn't there. Bobby felt a stab of worry pierce his chest like an icy knife. In 3 years, Steph had only missed once, when he had a severe flu. Something must be very wrong for him to miss training on the eve of such a crucial game. That's when his cell phone rang, cutting the silence like an emergency siren. "Grandpa!" Sophia's voice sounded distant and scared. "I fell off my bike going to school. I'm at the hospital, but I'm okay. Can you come pick me up?" Bobby's world collapsed and rebuilt itself in a matter of seconds. For the first time in 15 years, he abandoned his work post without telling anyone, running to the hospital like a desperate father who fears nothing more than seeing a child suffer. Sophia had fractured her left wrist and had some scratches, but she was fine. The doctor said it was a simple injury, that it would heal in a few weeks. But the scare had been enormous, for both, and Bobby spent the entire day at the hospital, filling out paperwork and ensuring his granddaughter received the best possible care. How is it possible that an apparently simple accident can become the catalyst for miracles? When Bobby finally returned to the arena the next day, expecting to face an epic scolding for missing work without notice, he found something he would never forget. Steph was waiting for him in the employees' locker room. He wasn't in training uniform. He wore an elegant suit, as if coming from an important meeting, but his eyes carried genuine concern that cut Bobby's heart like a heated blade. "Mr. Martinez," Steph said, his voice loaded with contained emotion. "I heard Sophia got hurt. How is she?" Bobby was paralyzed. How did Steph know about Sophia? How did he know he had missed work? But before he could form any question, Steph continued. "I brought some things to help," Steph said, pointing to a bag beside him. "And I'd like to talk with you, if you have time." It's impossible not to feel that some moments are loaded with magic that transcends any logical explanation. What came next changed Bobby's life forever. Steph had brought not only gifts for Sophia, books about medicine, a tablet for her to study, candies he knew were her favorites. But the real surprise came when he mentioned, casually, that he had talked with his personal doctor. "Dr. Harrison is a specialist in children's fractures," Steph explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'd like him to take a look at Sophia, just to make sure everything is fine. No cost, obviously." Bobby was speechless, feeling a mixture of gratitude and confusion that left his mind spinning like a wheel without brakes. How did Steph know so much about his family? Why did he care so much about people he barely knew? Have you ever wondered how many lives we can touch without even realizing it? It was then that Steph revealed something that broke and healed Bobby's heart simultaneously. "Mr. Martinez," Steph said, his voice trembling slightly, "during these 3 years, you gave me something few can give: pure respect. You never tried to take photos, sell stories to newspapers, ask for favors or autographs. You treated me as a person, not as a celebrity." Steph paused, running his hand through his hair as a gesture of genuine vulnerability. "But what you don't know is that my parents worked exactly like you when I was little. Janitors, custodians, people who woke up before the sun to give dignity to their families. I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I would give back to people like them." Steph's words echoed through the small locker room like distant thunder announcing a storm of emotions. "Sophia has the dream of being a doctor," Steph continued, his voice gaining strength and determination. "I want to pay for her studies, university, medical school, everything. Because you taught me that silent dedication is worth more than any applause." Bobby felt his legs weaken, had to lean on the bench to not collapse. It was generosity too great, kindness that transcended anything he could imagine. But it was also a dilemma that cut his soul in half like a sharp sword. Accepting that help meant admitting he couldn't take care of Sophia alone. It went against everything he believed about dignity and work, about earning things with your own sweat, about being a man who supports his family with his own hands. But it also meant giving Sophia an opportunity he could never provide. Great things happen when nobody's watching, and sometimes those things test everything we believe about pride and humility. "I can't accept this," Bobby whispered, tears running down his face like rivers finding their way to the sea. "It's too generous. It wouldn't be fair." Steph smiled, a smile that carried deep understanding of a man who knows life's struggle. "Mr. Martinez," he said, placing his hand on Bobby's shoulder with the gentleness of a son touching his father, "you don't understand. It's not charity. It's family. You are family to me." At that moment, Bobby finally understood that great things happen when nobody's watching, and that sometimes those things include learning that accepting help can be the greatest act of courage someone can demonstrate. He accepted, but with one condition: he wanted to work to deserve that generosity. Steph agreed immediately, offering a job at the foundation he was creating, a high position Bobby could assume when he retired from the arena. The hug that followed was between two men who had understood each other in silence for 3 years, and who now discovered that family isn't just who shares your blood, but who shares your dreams. 5 years later. You can notice that time has the power to transform not just people, but entire destinies, like a river that changes course and carries the entire landscape with it. Sophia was now 17 years old, and in her second year at the University of California, studying medicine with a full scholarship from the Curry Foundation. Her hands, which once held only school books, now dissected organs in laboratories that smelled of formaldehyde and realized dreams. Her voice, which once whispered about impossibilities, now echoed through university corridors with the confidence of someone who knows they are exactly where they should be. Bobby, at 63 years old, had retired from the arena 6 months before and now worked as facilities coordinator for the Steph Curry Foundation. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission that filled his soul like clear water in a dried well. He helped other invisible workers, people who worked while the world slept, people who understood that great things happen when nobody's watching. Steph, now a 3-time NBA champion and global icon recognized on any corner of the planet, continued being simply the hard-working kid to Bobby, a title he had earned at 5 in the morning on an empty court and would never lose, no matter how many trophies he accumulated. How is it possible that some human connections remain unchanged even when everything around them transforms completely? It was a sunny September morning when Bobby received the phone call that made him sit heavily in the foundation office chair, feeling his legs tremble like leaves in the wind. "Mr. Martinez," said Steph's familiar voice, now loaded with the authority of a man who had conquered the world but never forgot his origins. "I'd like you to be present at a special ceremony tomorrow. It's important to me." The next day, Bobby found himself before a crowd of more than 500 people gathered on a lot in Oakland that once housed abandoned buildings and now displayed a state-of-the-art community basketball court. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the sweet aroma of renewed hope, while the sound of children laughing echoed like celestial music that feeds the soul. It was the inauguration of the Carmen Martinez Community Court. Bobby felt his heart accelerate when he saw his late wife's name engraved in golden letters at the court entrance. Tears streamed down his face like rivers that finally find the sea, each drop carrying decades of love, loss, and rebirth. It's impossible not to be moved when we discover that those we love never really die. They just transform into inspiration for others to live. Steph stepped onto the improvised stage, wearing an elegant suit, but carrying in his eyes that same intensity Bobby had recognized years before on an empty court at 5 in the morning. His voice echoed through the microphone, reaching every person present like a collective embrace. "This court is dedicated to all the Bobby Martinezes of the world," Steph began, his voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. "People who work while others sleep, who believe in dreams that aren't their own, who prove every day that real greatness happens when nobody's watching. Have you ever wondered how many lives can be touched by a single act of public recognition?" Steph continued, telling that entire crowd the story that only he and Bobby knew completely. He spoke about cold mornings shared in silence, about a man who witnessed his most vulnerable moments without ever asking for anything in return, about how true family is formed not through blood, but through mutual respect and unconditional love. "Bobby Martinez taught me that respect is built at 5 in the morning, when nobody's watching," Steph said, his voice gaining strength like a wave that grows before breaking on the beach. "He taught me that dignity isn't measured by the size of a salary, but by the size of the heart. He taught me that some of the most important people in our lives are those who never step into the spotlight." The crowd listened in reverent silence, absorbing each word like dry earth absorbs rain after a long drought. Then came the moment Bobby would never forget. "Bobby Martinez," Steph said, pointing directly at him in the crowd, "would you like to say a few words?" The world stopped for an eternal instant. Bobby felt all the people looking at him, waiting for words of wisdom from a man who had spent his entire life being invisible. His legs trembled, his throat dried like a desert, but something greater than fear propelled him toward the stage. How is it possible that a man who always lived in the shadows can suddenly become light for others? Bobby climbed onto the stage with uncertain but determined steps, looked at that crowd of hopeful faces, and felt Carmen's presence beside him like a gentle breeze touching the skin. When he opened his mouth, the words came directly from his heart, without filters or rehearsals. "Carmen always said that God places special people in our path when we need them most," Bobby began, his voice echoing through the sound system like a whispered prayer, gaining its own life. She was right. Sometimes you witness greatness being built. Sometimes greatness witnesses you back. He paused, looking directly at Steph with gratitude that transcended words. "Not all heroes wear team uniforms," Bobby continued, feeling tears flow freely down his face like rivers that can no longer be dammed. "Some wear work uniforms and arrive when the world is still sleeping. Some heroes clean, sweep, fix, and care. And some heroes recognize other heroes, even when they don't know they are heroes." The crowd exploded in applause that sounded like summer thunder, but Bobby could barely hear it. He was lost in memories of cold mornings, dreams that seemed impossible, a granddaughter who now studied medicine, and a young player who had become not just a champion, but family. It's impossible not to recognize that some moments are so perfect, they seem to have been orchestrated by destiny itself. After the ceremony, when the crowd dispersed and only Bobby and Steph remained on the newly inaugurated court, something happened that completed the I-E circle that had begun 5 years before. Steph handed Bobby an elegant envelope, sealed with the same care that characterized everything he did. "For Sophia," Steph said simply. "It's time for her to take the next step." Bobby opened the envelope with hands trembling with anticipation and emotion, revealing a letter that would once again change the course of their lives. It was an invitation for Sophia to intern at the private hospital where Steph received treatment, the same hospital where the country's best doctors practiced cutting-edge medicine, an internship that would open doors she didn't even know existed, that would place her alongside professionals who could shape her career from the beginning. You can notice that some blessings come disguised as opportunities that seem like coincidences, but are actually gifts carefully planned by love. "How am I going to thank for all this?" Bobby asked, his voice broken by emotion that overflowed like a dam that can no longer contain the waters. Steph smiled, that same respectful smile he had exchanged with Bobby years before on an empty court, when they were just two men who recognized each other as hard-working souls. "You already thanked," Steph responded, placing his hand on Bobby's shoulder as a gesture that had become a symbol of their unlikely but deep friendship. "You thanked by being yourself. You thanked by showing that great things happen when nobody's watching. You thanked by teaching me that family is chosen, not inherited." That afternoon, Bobby called Sophia, who was between classes in the anatomy laboratory. When she answered, he could hear the background noise of the university, voices of young people pursuing dreams, hurried steps of those in a hurry to change the world. "Princess," Bobby said, his voice loaded with emotion and pride that overflow like a dam finally opening. "Remember when you asked if great things really happen when nobody's watching?" "Of course, Grandpa," Sophia responded, her sweet voice carrying the maturity of a young woman who had grown up surrounded by examples of perseverance and dignity. "I just discovered that, yes, and they never stop happening." Bobby told about the hospital internship, about the opportunities opening up, about how Carmen would be proud to see her granddaughter realizing dreams that once seemed impossible, like distant stars. When he hung up the phone, Bobby was alone in his small foundation office, surrounded by photos of all the people who had been helped over the years. Custodians who returned to school, cleaning ladies who opened small businesses, security guards who discovered hidden talents. Have you ever wondered how one life can multiply into hundreds of other lives when lived with true purpose? In that moment of absolute silence, Bobby felt Carmen's presence more clearly than he had felt since she departed. It was as if she were whispering in his ear, reminding him of the truth she always knew. Great things happen when nobody's watching, but sometimes those things grow so much they illuminate the entire world. Bobby smiled, picked up a photo of Sophia at her high school graduation, and murmured to the image of the wife he kept in his heart. "Carmen, mi amor, you were right about everything. You were right about God placing special people in our path. You were right about great things happening when nobody's watching. And you were right about love being the only thing that really multiplies when shared." As the sun set over Oakland, painting the sky with colors that reminded him of Carmen's golden hair, Bobby understood that some legacies are never forgotten because they don't die with people. They are reborn in every life they touch, in every dream they help realize, in every moment of dignity and respect shared in silence. Great things happen when nobody's watching, and sometimes those things transform into legacies that echo through eternity, touching hearts and changing lives long after the first steps were taken on an empty court at 5 in the morning.